So next up, and the last speaker before we can do some more mingle and also grab a small bite to eat, is Karol Ussher. He's an old friend of mine. He used to work in Microsoft and then Google as head of Google Cloud Partnerships in Europe, and then decided to join this obscure startup from Israel called Spotinst. So Karol, welcome on stage. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, so I gave up all the free lunches of Google to join this obscure Israeli company, but I haven't looked back. So we're about 2 years old, and we have 1,200 customers. Has anybody heard of us? Spotinst? No? Let's change that today. Thank you, just one person. So does anybody use cloud in the room today? AWS? Brilliant. So we can help you reduce your costs. So similar to what Yalma was talking about, gathering all that data, we spent the last 3 years gathering data on how a data center can run more efficiently. And we can use that data to lower your costs by 80%. So our customers implement Spotinst. Within a few weeks, they're lowering their cost by about 80%. Our biggest challenge is people think it's too good to be true. So what I thought I'd do is just share some of my learnings spending the last 10 years at Microsoft and Google about AI and how we think about AI, or how they think about AI now. And yeah, then talk a little bit more about what we do. So what is AI? We had 2 great presentations so far, 2 enterprise applications. What would we say AI is? I think generally people talk about, you know, this sci-fi version, there's going to be robots, they're going to take over the world, Skynet. In fact, I had a meeting with a very interesting cab company today, and we set up the AI system for them, and they were like, okay, so we just connected to Skynet. So AI is not that. It is a force for good. Even if you listen to Elon Musk, who has very pessimistic views, there's a lot of benefits we can take from AI. But we talked about a chatbot earlier, and this is one of the original tests. It's called the Turing test. And the idea was, if an AI algorithm can convince the audience that it's a human and not a computer, then that solved AI. So it's a 65-year-old test. It was cracked 4 years ago. But they used some smart programming techniques to trick the human evaluators. So you use things like coded sarcasm, coded quirks, etc. So can we just code AI? Who thinks we can just kind of code in rules for AI? Brilliant. Great. So this guy here, Eric Schmidt, what he says is AI is about helping machines to learn. So it's not about telling them what to do. It's about building the conditions for them to learn themselves. So here's the most academic slide I have. But if you think about, I think a good example to explain this is, if you think about Gmail, the very simple program is if something, then do something. If I go to Google, I type in Stockholm, present ads that relate to Stockholm. If in Gmail I get an email from Frederick, block it, put it in my spam. And then there's things like statistical reasoning. I get a lot of emails from Frederick and his team, so they should go to my priority inbox because I reply to them, I answer them. We start to gather data about the interaction with those emails, so then we can use statistical reasoning. And then machine learning. So that's where we have sets of spam and sets of good data, and then we can start to learn what good is versus what spam is. And that's always running in the background. So Gmail system runs that in the background to identify which is likely spam and which is likely legitimate. And then AI. So does anyone have the Gmail app? The new Gmail app? It gives you suggestions for how you can respond. So it's actually understanding context, meaning, and language. So that's kind of 4 different stages. That make sense? So recently, this is really cool. It's a big step. It's something called the grandmother neuron. Has anyone heard of the grandmother neuron? So it's the idea where a machine can actually understand and recognize objects itself. So what they did, Google Brain team, is they fed 10,000 hours of YouTube videos into 16,000 machines. And what happened was the system started to understand what a human is versus what a cat is. There was no labels, no training. It just started to observe that there's a lot of cats on YouTube.
Unsupervised learning.
This is unsupervised learning, exactly.
No labels at all.
Exactly, correct. So supervised learning is where you say, this is spam,
Yeah.
this is not spam. Unsupervised learning is where you tell me what you find. You learn by yourself. Exactly. That's a good point. Tay. Anybody familiar with Tay? Yes, good. So you know the joke that's coming. So Tay is Microsoft's attempt at a chat robot. It learned from interactions and tweets. What could go wrong? So, within the first few hours, Tay wants to build a wall and Mexico's going to pay for it. And then it went full-blown crazy. So in less than 24 hours, Microsoft had to take it down. It became a sex robot and started talking all these crazy Nazi things. So AI can be abused. It's the quality of the data you get. So garbage in, garbage out. Yeah, so they won't be making that mistake again. So are you using AI today? So if you've used any of these Google products, you probably are. If you've done a voice search or if you've done a search in your Google Photos, Google's able to identify from your images that type of entity. So it automatically labels it. You don't have to say, there's a picture of my dog, this equals dog. Based on the corpus, it starts to understand that, it starts to learn. You might have seen these on the web. So this is to determine that you're not a robot. In actual fact, what you're doing is you're training a robot. So this is used to build a entity database for a knowledge graph for Google. So you're training it to understand visual images, which is very difficult for a robot to do. And what happens is Google creates this entity knowledge graph, this representation of everything it has in the world. So let me give you some examples. Let's see if this works. So for instance, there's this large knowledge graph, these different entities, how they relate to each other. And it can take something like a sign, do OCR, extract the context that's there. Look at things like identifying whether it's a traffic sign, whether it's roads, signage, etc. And this is probably the largest database or knowledge graph in the world. And this is how Google is able to improve its products. Let's try this. Hej, jag heter Karl. Jag har bott i Sverige flera år sedan, men nu är min svenska jätterostig. Jätterostig? Oh, stop. So it's even smarter. So it's starting to understand language and it changes in real time. So we can go to English. I think it's got a better corpus in English. Let's try this. Hello, my name is Carl. I live in London. Brilliant. So in real time it's interpreting what I'm saying, it's matching it to its knowledge base of how it understands sentences, and it's listening to me right now. Great. And then image. So let's take an image of a player you probably recognize. Right, let's see if AI does. So, sees a lot of anger, typical Zlatan. It's identified as Zlatan Ibrahimovic. It pulls out even text that it finds in the background, so HY for Highlander. So these kind of entities, this work is being done by Google and it's now available to everybody. You can use this to build your applications, and that's part of Google Cloud Platform. But I better get back to my new company. So, let's have a look at some other enterprise applications. So Airbus have implemented this in order to identify whether satellite images contain snow or clouds, so they can do better weather forecasting and they can determine routes, etc. Can anybody find the clouds in that image? Well done. So it's very difficult for a human to do this, and it's painstaking. You spend a lot of time to do it. When you train a machine, it's a lot more effective. So they saw big savings in terms of time to process. The Phoenix Islands, they had a lot of illegal fishing, and that was a big cost to their economy because they're a small island. One of the main things they have is the fish in their waters. Now, you know, sending out boats to try and intercept people, they'd say, no, we're just passing through, we're not fishing. So what they started to do is identify satellite data to get an understanding of what illegal fishing looks like, and they used that in order to do some lawsuits that brought them 2.2 million, which is around 1% of their GDP. So they never have the manpower to do this, but now using AI, they can achieve these things. And then Google actually threw it at its data center data points. Didn't really know what was going to come out. What it found was they could increase energy consumption by 40%. Sorry, decrease energy consumption by 40%. They need WATI maybe. And millions of dollars have been saved as a result of that. So my current company, Spotinst, what do we do? So a lot of companies today, you use cloud. It doesn't make sense to build your own data center. It's a lot cheaper, we were told, to go to the cloud, but it's still quite expensive. Especially if you're a startup, one of your biggest outgoing costs is going to be cloud expenditure. Now, has anyone heard of something called excess capacity spot instances? Good, okay. So let me explain that. So a typical data center, and I've been to the lovely one over in Hamina in Finland, very secure, very difficult to get in. It's this huge center, pipes everywhere, but are constantly building it bigger and bigger every day. In fact, AWS say they build the same amount of capacity they used to run AWS when it was a $7 billion company every single day. So huge amounts of capacity. So could you guess what kind of percentage utilization a data center runs? If it's max, you got a problem, because let's say there's a big news story in Sweden, you go to Aftonbladet, who's running on Google or AWS, and the site is down because we can't handle any more traffic. So typically a data center runs at around 57% capacity. So that's a lot of spare servers lying around. And these are called spot instances, so it's mainly in the AWS market. They define this, this market of spot. And the idea is customers pay a bid for that spare capacity. So the data center owners say, well, we could leave that idle, but that's a cost, right? We've already paid for the servers. It's like going to a hotel. It's like, the rooms are empty, we might as well just do a quick discount. Let's do a quick sale. So that's what they do. But it comes with a catch. The catch is, with 2 minutes warning, Amazon or Google or Azure can say, we want that back. You know, somebody's going to pay full price. So what we've built with Spotinst is a way to predict that, prevent it, and then take preemptive action so that your machines and your applications never go down. So if you look at the actual data, so this is data from EU West 1A, and what we see from June right through to September, there was a 90% saving running on spot instances. So it's that much cheaper. So we heard the value of data early on. So data is really important. We started this as a PhD project, so we had a lot of that data already. We get a lot of real-time data as well, so we understand what's going on across 1,200 customers. We get 100,000 different instances in real time. We understand what's going on in the different data centers. And then we got very smart engineers, and they're working with something we heard earlier as well, Markov models, right? So using the Markov models, we can start to build patterns and identify trends. And that gives us predictive analytics. So the result is we've got a 99.95% confidence score of when an instance is going to be terminated around 14 minutes beforehand. And then we can take preemptive action. So the customer can run on these, what are typically risky instances, for a much cheaper price, 80 to 90% saving, without any downtime. So we're predicting when the termination is going to happen. We need to take some action, back up the machine, create a new instance, reroute traffic, and then we prevent any downtime. So if you look at the standard way to reducing costs, some of the large organizations do this because it's a lot of work. You got to tag, you got to do governance, you got to turn off machines, you got to do right sizing. It's a lot of work. It's like driving a car and you see, okay, this is my speed, the lights are flashing, I'm going too fast, the brakes are being hit too hard. It's still a lot of work, you're still doing the driving. The analogy we use for Spotinst is it's the self-driving car. So all you want to do is tell it the parameters of where you want to go and what you want to achieve, and it takes care of it for you. So the result is always online, 80% saving, and you don't need to re-architect. So we integrate just like Wati comes into your home. Our application will go into your AWS account as an IAM policy, and we'll be like an unblinking engineer that will just identify the best instances to run for you. Here's an example of one customer who implemented it. They've been a customer for around a year. This is over 90 days. So here you see what they would have paid AWS. This is what they actually paid AWS. And this is what we saved them. So they're pretty happy. And we only take a percentage of the saving. So if you're not saving money, we don't charge you. So how big can this be? So we really think if you look at the biggest organizations today, they're not bogged down by having to build infrastructure, invest in capital. You know, Marriott, who builds all those huge hotels, are being disrupted by Airbnb. The taxi Stockholm is being disrupted by Uber. All of these guys have no assets. Airbnb, you know, it's doing amazing growth, and again, it doesn't have to build those assets. So what we want to do is the same idea, the same model for data centers. We're supporting a number of those different data centers today. AWS, Google, Azure, even Alibaba Cloud, and also IBM Cloud. Our next phase is to move to private data centers and Equinix data centers, where these DC owners can say, listen, we've got this spare capacity, rather than leaving it idle, which is a cost, we'd like to sell it at a lower price. So that's what we're supporting. So Intel recently has given us 15 million to build this out. They're pretty excited about what it can do. It can allow guys like you in the room, entrepreneurs, now compete with the big guys and not have to fork out all that money on your AWS or public cloud expenditure. So, call to action, sign up. We'll get you up and running. 14-day trial, very simple to get up and running. If you have an AWS, Azure, or Google account, we can easily plug in, and then you can watch it running. We don't need to change your architecture, install anything really. We just have an access policy, and what we'll do is we'll bring down your cost by around 100%. And we're hiring. So if anybody likes the sound of this, has experience with machine learning, AI, and would like to be part of making cloud accessible for everyone, please join us.
Are you in Stockholm, based in Stockholm or in London?
I'm based in London. Yeah. But we're hiring here too. Any questions? Sure.
What about competition? I mean, the big cloud companies that
Yeah.
you mentioned, aren't they into doing this kind of optimization so they will ultimately optimize their data centers because they would get a lot of money from that?
Yeah, it's a very good question we get all the time. So, a few key points. They acquired a company similar to us called Cluster K about 2 years ago.
What?
But the challenge is, if they make it too easy, everybody does it and they cannibalize themselves. Right? If it was easy to go for a sale, everybody would just go for the sale. No one would pay for full price. So it's not in their interest to make it super easy. What we're doing now is we're working at the GM level, for instance, at AWS. Their target is to grow unused capacity. They want more people to use it because it's a cost to the business. So we're a strategic partner of AWS. We help them. Now, if you're an account manager and suddenly your customer is paying 80% less, as a sales rep, you're not going to be happy. You're right. But at a strategic level, it makes them more competitive because there's so many cloud options today.
So it's a win-win.
It's a win-win, exactly. They can't make it too easy, but they see the value in having us there who are helping customers use more Spot. Because let's say a customer says, listen, we're paying way too much on cloud provider A, we want to move to cloud provider B. They can say, well, we'll bring in Spotinst, you don't need to change anything, you'll pay a lower price. Hi.
Yes. What type of customers do you typically work with size-wise? Is this a viable solution for an enterprise scale clients as well?
Yeah, so Intel's a customer, and then they invested. HP, Cisco, VMware, all the big companies, Nielsen, and then we have the long tail of much smaller enterprises. Yeah. So 95% of our customers run production on Spotinst using our offering. Go ahead.
How do you make the prediction?
Well, I can't tell you, otherwise you'll create a company. We use, there's signals, lots of signals happening all the time. We're getting signals about instances becoming available, terminating. We've got patterns that we look at. For instance, Monte Carlo simulations happen on the weekend before the business week starts. Media sites start to spike when it's after 5 p.m. people go home from work. So we have all these different signals we're listening to, and then we use that to generate Markov models, and that gives a confidence score. And only when we're really confident will we take the necessary action. Sometimes we're not, we don't really understand what's going on, and then we'll move the customer back to the standard on-demand instances and wait until we have a better confidence level. Any questions? Who wants to try it now? Great. 2 people. Great. Thank you.
All right. So thank you very much, Karol, for coming. And I also like to thank all of you guys for coming. It's very nice to see the amount of interest there is in this particular team. Now is a chance to mingle and talk to some of the speakers, talk definitely to some of the companies. There will be some wraps, and there will still be some refreshments and drinks out there. We're here until 8. Karol unfortunately has to run off, but if you have some question about Spotinst, you can approach me and I'll tell you a little bit more about what I can answer. Thank you.